It was supposed to be a quiet weekend at my lake cabin. Just me, the water, and some peace for once. I'd barely unpacked when I heard tires crunching up the gravel driveway. That's when she showed up. You know the type. Perfectly pressed. Polo shirt, clipboard in hand. That look like she owns the place even if she doesn't. Yep, HOA Karen. I didn't even know there was an HOA this far out in the woods. But somehow, she found her way to my cabin with a big attitude and an even bigger demand. She said she was monitoring the neighborhood, and that I needed to share my cabin with one of her approved guests for the weekend. I laughed at first, thinking it was a weird joke, but she was dead serious. Apparently, she'd promised some of her friends a relaxing lake getaway, and figured my cabin would be perfect. When I told her politely that no one was staying here but me, she lost it. I mean, full volume screeching in the middle of the driveway. It was like a scene from a bad reality show. Arms waving, threats, flying, her little dog barking from her SUV like backup. What she didn't know, what made this all so much sweeter, is that someone very important was already inside the cabin. Someone who just happened to overhear everything. Yep, the mayor. Turns out he and I go way back, and he was crashing at my place for a quiet retreat. He'd asked to keep it low-key, no one knowing he was even here. So, when Karen went off, she had no idea she was screaming like a lunatic in front of one of the most powerful people in town. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, the mayor opened the door. The moment that door creaked open, everything froze. Karen spun. Around mid-rant, her face still red from shouting. And there he was, Mayor Thompson standing in the doorway with a coffee mug in hand, wearing a hoodie and looking very much like a man who hadn't planned on getting involved. Her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. You could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out how she'd just yelled at a random guy who turned out to be the mayor. Now, here's where it gets even more awkward. Karen, who moments ago had been yelling about how I was violating neighborhood unity, suddenly snapped into this weird fake smile mode. She started talking all fast and sweet, like none of that just happened. "Oh, Mayor Thompson, I didn't realize you were here. What a surprise." Her voice went up about 2 octaves. She kept glancing at me like I was supposed to play along and pretend she hadn't just accused me of being uncooperative with community standards. Thing is, Mayor Thompson didn't say much at first. He just raised an eyebrow and sipped his coffee like he was watching a drama unfold on TV. I could tell he was giving her a chance to dig her own hole, and boy, did she start digging. She went on about how she was just trying to enforce cabin-sharing courtesy, whatever that means, and how sometimes people like me don't fully appreciate community values. She even said something about how the lakefront should be shared among residents deemed suitable by the HOA board. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about a cabin. This woman thought she had control over everything and everyone around the lake, and she was used to getting her way. But what she didn't realize was the mayor wasn't the only one she'd underestimated. Mayor Thompson stepped out onto the porch, calm as ever, but you could feel the shift in energy. Karen tried to recover, still plastering on that smile, but her hands were fidgeting with her clipboard like it was a security blanket. The thing is, she wasn't just some nosy neighbor. Turns out she'd recently wormed her way onto the HOA board for the nearby lake community. And from what I've heard, she'd been making people's lives miserable ever since. Petty rules, unannounced inspections, even fines for lawn chairs being the wrong color. Classic HOA drama, but out here, it was turning into something bigger. Karen started talking about how my cabin technically sat within the extended influence zone of the HOA, a term she made up right there on the spot. I didn't even buy into the HOA when I bought this place years ago. It was just outside their border, which is exactly why I picked it. But now, with lakefront property in high demand, the board had apparently been trying to push their limits, bringing in new regulations without actual authority. She was acting like a sheriff in a town that never hired her. While she went on about unauthorized guest stays and unregistered use of community dock space, the mayor stayed quiet, but his expression said everything. I knew he was letting her pile it on for a reason, and then it hit me. This wasn't just about a cabin. Something else was going on. I remembered overhearing the mayor on the phone earlier that morning, something about land zoning and a proposal coming up for review. This little stretch of lakefront land might be on someone's radar for development. And Karen, or someone, behind her, wanted control before it hit the public. That explained her sudden interest in my place, and why she was so desperate to get her people in. But I still didn't know who else was involved, or how far they were willing to go. The air was getting thick with tension. Karen was still rambling, stacking one made-up rule on top of another, trying to paint me as some kind of rogue cabin owner threatening the integrity of the lake community. Mayor Thompson leaned against the railing now, arms crossed, saying, "Nothing, but watching everything." I could feel something shifting behind the scenes, like this was no longer about me turning down her request. This was about power, influence, and someone trying to lock in control before the rest of us even realized what was happening. Karen finally stopped talking long enough to take a breath, and that's when another car pulled up. A sleek black SUV, windows tinted, and out stepped a man in a sharp suit. He didn't look like the kind of guy who spent weekends fishing or roasting marshmallows. He looked like a lawyer. Or worse, someone from a real estate firm. He gave Karen a nod like they were familiar. Then he looked at me, then the mayor, then back at the cabin like he was sizing it up. That's when my stomach dropped. The man introduced himself as Mr. Collins and said he was representing a group interested in revitalizing the lakefront area. He casually mentioned that some of the older cabins, like mine, might fall under potential reassessment if new zoning passed. That's when the mayor's jaw tightened. He still didn't speak, but you could feel it. Something had crossed a line. Karen jumped in again, acting like she was part of some official effort, throwing out phrases like increasing property value, streamlined community vision, and modern recreational infrastructure. It was all code. Code for replacing old cabins with vacation rentals, condos, maybe even a private marina. I realized right then this wasn't just about her ego. This was about a land grab. And somehow, my cabin was the first domino they wanted to push. But they weren't counting on the mayor being here. And they definitely weren't expecting what was about to happen next. Just as I was about to say something, Mayor Thompson finally spoke, but not to Karen and not to me. He turned straight to Mr. Collins and said, "I thought your firm wasn't moving forward without a vote." That hit like a slap in the silence. Karen's fake smile twitched, and Mr. Collins paused, clearly not expecting to be recognized. The mayor's tone was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. You could tell this wasn't the first time he'd dealt with people like Collins. That's when the second twist hit, and honestly, it shook me. Collins didn't deny it. He just nodded slowly and said, "Things have changed. Some board members agreed to move ahead. Unofficially." He didn't say it directly, but the message was loud and clear. Karen had gone behind the scenes with a few others, trying to push the project through before the rest of the town could react. No public meeting, no formal vote, just quiet pressure and shady deals. And then it got worse. The mayor asked one simple question. "Did you already file permits?" Collins didn't answer right away, but Karen did. She muttered something about preliminary paperwork and holding rights. That's when I saw it. On her clipboard, tucked behind the usual HOA forms, was a printed layout. A development map. My cabin wasn't just a nuisance to them, it was already marked for removal. Not maybe, not possibly. It was on the plan, boxed in red like it was already theirs. That's when the real fear kicked in. This wasn't just some power-hungry HOA drama anymore. This was a full-on scheme. And now I was staring down two people who were willing to bend rules, cross lines, and maybe worse, to take what they wanted. I didn't know who else was involved or how far up this went. But I did know one thing. They picked the wrong cabin and the wrong weekend to try and take it. The silence after that moment was thick. You could hear the lake water lapping in the background, like even nature was holding its breath. Mayor Thompson stepped down from the porch and walked straight over to Karen. His voice was low, but every word cut like a knife. "You do realize," he said, "that filing false permit paperwork under the guise of HOA authority is not just unethical, it's illegal." Karen's smile cracked. She looked to Collins, but he took a step back like he wanted no part of what was coming next. That's when the mayor pulled out his phone. "You'll want to talk fast," he said, "because if I make this call, it's going straight to the county attorney." Karen's face went pale. The whole community vision nonsense vanished. From her tone, she started stammering about just trying to help the neighborhood grow and following advice from higher up. But it was too late. The plan was exposed, and the mayor wasn't backing down. He made the call. Within the hour, 2 deputies showed up at the cabin. No sirens, no fuss, just calm professionalism. They asked to see Karen's paperwork. She tried to protest, but once they saw that development map and heard the mayor's side, the mood changed fast. Collins suddenly remembered he had a meeting elsewhere and disappeared faster than smoke. Karen was asked to leave the property and warned that an investigation into the HOA board's recent activities was now open. I thought that was the end of it. But here's the twist. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low over the lake, the mayor sat with me on the porch and said something I didn't expect. "You should know," he said quietly. "Your cabin sits on one of the only remaining parcels with historical protection status. It's not just yours. They can't touch it. Turns out my late grandfather had it registered decades ago. No one remembered, except the mayor. So not only was the scheme shut down, but the one place they were trying hardest to take, it was protected all along." After the dust settled, the lake finally felt quiet again, this time in a good way. Karen was removed from the HOA board within the week after other members found out what she'd been hiding. Turns out she wasn't just pushing for control on her own. There were emails, meetings, and even money exchanged between a few board members and the development group. But with the investigation now in full swing, most of them either resigned or were voted out by angry residents. People around the lake started talking again, some for the first time in years. It felt like the start of something better. As for Mr. Collins and his crew, the mayor made sure their permits were pulled and their proposals reviewed under a much stricter light. Any chance they had of turning our lakefront into some flashy resort? Gone. That quiet protection status my granddad had filed all those years ago ended up saving not just my cabin, but the whole shoreline around it. Funny how one person doing something decades earlier can end up making all the difference. I stayed a few extra days at the cabin after that, just to breathe. No HOA drama, no legal threats, just birds, wind through the trees, and the kind of calm you don't realize you've missed until you finally get it back. The mayor headed out soon after, leaving behind a few files and a handwritten note that said, "Your grandfather would be proud." Looking back, what started as one woman trying to take over my lake cabin turned into something way bigger. It exposed a plan, shook up a corrupt HOA, and reminded all of us why protecting what matters, our homes, our spaces, our community, is worth standing up for. Sometimes saying no is all it takes to change everything.